each other and chat and just give each other views about things. What I did do was I invited people to tell me things they wanted to discuss so that I could try and make sure that we covered them. And I thought, I'm not going to put this out as a formal agenda, but I'm just going to give you an idea of some of the issues that people have over mob grazing, or use that term incredibly loosely, basically rearing sheep on low input systems. And I mean, I'd be the first to say that I frankly find it an awful lot harder to get what I want out of my sheep compared to, say, cattle under this system. So we have much lower scanning percentages now than we ever used to. We probably end up keeping more lambs on over the winter because they haven't finished by Christmas, and we can't really finish anything between Christmas and April or May. So I think there's loads of things that we can talk about and have ideas about how we can get around them. So the issues that came back were looking at height of grazing covers, how we manage our grazing, how that affects the weight put on by lambs, the condition of the ewes, how we deal with rotation and worming, how those grazing covers might be affected when you include cattle in the grazing rotation. Do people run flirts? Are people moving fences for sheep separately from cattle? These are all things that I'm hoping we'll cover tonight. Again, a big issue under Pasture for Life standards is the nutrition for the pre-lambing ewes. When we're not able to feed a conventional sheep nut, you can feed lucerne nuts, but only in exceptional circumstances. So how do we deal with multiple births? How do we deal with producing our sheep in different geographical areas? In the uplands is so different from the south of the country. Do different breeds perform differently? What about mineral requirements, testing for deficiencies and remedies? Another area that people want to discuss was how do you actually finish lambs from pasture only? How do you get butchers to be happy about the product that you're producing? What sort of weights and fat cover are we looking at? Looking behind all of this, what about animal selection and genetics? Tail docking, castration, and the value of body condition scoring. So it's a massive list of things that have come forward. So, I mean, I'm gonna just open it out. It'd be great to see faces if we can, because it makes it easier and hopefully people want to come in. It really is supposed to be a chat. Imagine that we're all in the pub together, just wanting to talk about things. So I have a feeling I might just launch in on Hannah and see if she'd like to kick us off with something. Hannah, would you be up for that?
Yeah,
sorry to bounce it on you.
In the deep end at all there. Cheers. I'm chopping carrots. I'm making dinner at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Was there anything in particular you wanted me to talk about?
Well, what about telling us a little bit about your setup and system and what you feel you struggle with?
Okay. Having someone else cook dinner, I think probably, but no. So I've been working with sheep for 20 plus years. I've been on the farm here this is our 12th year, and so we started at micro scale. We've had 4 sheep lambing before and 10 sheep lambing before, but I have lambed on commercial organic farms, 600 ewes, 1,000 ewes kind of thing, and now we've built up to, we're going to lamb 100 this year. And I do a mixture. I've done a lot of different experimentations. So I've lambed in a flurd before, which is good fun, while the cows are breathing down my neck and an arm up a ewe. I set stock the sheep currently under solar panels because that's I've got a very kind of flexible tenant land space. So, but I do bring the sheep home to lamb at home and to mob graze whilst I'm lambing. And I feel like I've kind of, it's very dangerous to say it before lambing started, but I feel like I've got quite a kind of neat system now for, I've figured out a few things in terms of how to lamb mob grazing, and a few of the things that people are concerned about seem to be okay. My issues really come down to in spaces when I'm not mobbing, when I'm set stocking. That seems to be the problem, and it's just, all round proof that mobbing the sheep is best in terms of parasite control and nutrition. So yeah, I'm happy to talk more. That your list was incredible, Fidelity, the stuff that we can try and talk about.
Well, well, it's up to everybody who contributes to that list to say some things on it. So thank you, Hannah. That's a great introduction. Has anyone got anything else they're burning to say to start off? Okay, so I'm going to kick out the first question then to hopefully people might give ideas. So Hannah talked about mob grazing at lambing. So, I mean, I'd be really interested to know how people do that. I mean, here at home, what we tend to do is we lamb about 180 ewes. We tend to put them all in one field together, easy checking. And then as they lamb, the day after we move them through into groups, and then when there's about 40 or 50 or so, we start to move them fairly regularly through the fences. So they're probably mob grazing of sorts within a couple of weeks, and then by the time the last one's lambed, we try and get them all into one big bunch, or maybe two. It could be early lambers and late lambers, probably a month or 5 weeks after we started lambing. We have a pretty quick lambing cycle normally. Yeah, Ian, yeah.
How, when you say you're moving them on the following day, are you literally, you're walking ewes with lamb at foot, 24 hours old, and you're moving them into a different field?
Yeah, we are.
So you're lambing, so are you lambing with two fields next to each other, one that's sort of like set stopped, and then one that is on a bigger field that started a rotation?
Or we might.
How do you get your lambs, happily to walk across, and then to without any stress with the ewe, and then have them join a mob somewhere else?
So we lamb entirely outside. I mean, unless we've got problems, which then they need to come in. So actually, the following morning or the next day after 24 hours, we go around with the quad bike and trailer. We catch the ewes up, the lambs up, easy peasy with a crook. Just pick them up and then hold them in the quad bike trailer, and the ewe will come in afterwards because she'll want to follow the lambs in. Just sometimes takes two of us to do that, but we get them in as stress-free as we can. We mark up the ewes and lambs with the same numbers. We castrate the boys, and we do tail docking. I'd be interested if people got views on that, because there are views on that. We obviously check the ewe for milk, check her feet. We did do, and I only did this because the vet said, and I think we might stop it. We did actually at that point, it's the only time we wormed the ewes. We do fairly frequent fecal egg counts throughout the year, but the one time when the vet said it's good to worm the ewes would be at lambing time. So we basically give the ewes a going over. We've checked them all, checked their teeth, checked their feet, all in the quad bike, and then we can of course drive several fields away if we want to get them into that field. So, and you can get two, and if they're well behaved, 3 sets of ewes and lambs in one quad bike trailer and move them that way.
Without and you don't actually have to restrain the ewe while you put the second set in or something like that?
No, they're usually pretty good if you dump their lambs in front of them in the trailer, and maybe one of you needs to stand in the trailer. In fact, often the second ewe is quite easy to get in, because she'll want to go in. As long as you get her lambs in the trailer, she'll usually jump in quite quickly. We're pretty light on our feet, Ian, when by the end of lambing.
I sort of use a similar technique in as much as when I'm tagging lambs, I can grab the lamb, and then I put them in a upturned dog crate, and then the ewe will hang around basically. And I use the same technique if I do need to grab a ewe to take her into the shed. I'll grab the lambs, put them in the trailer, and with a bit of encouragement, most ewes will go into the trailer to their lambs.
Yeah.
Assuming the lambs aren't that mobile, and leg it back out again.
Yeah.
Let's see. Wojtek's got a hand up. Did you have a question?
Wojtek.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're putting all the sheep together in one field? So twins, triplets, singles, everything together. And are you feeding them at all anything whilst they're in there? How long are they staying in that initial field? And how long what sort of grass do you sort of have at that point? How long have you rested it for prior to that?
Well, that's a really interesting set of questions, Wojtek, because so under Pasture for Life standards, ideally you're not feeding any of your ewes pre-lambing, but you always need to feed your triplets. But we have very few triplets. We have much lower scanning percentages now than we ever used to. We always used to, and we don't feed our fit twins. We just feed those that need it. which is often quite a small bunch. This year, we've done really badly. Our ewes are not in good condition. I put it down to the fact that we had hugely long grass. That's something I'd really like to talk tonight with people, is that we're in the southeast, and normally we suffer from way too little grass, but which the sheep actually thrive on, that constantly getting them nibbling away. But this last year we had too much grass. The sheep are not in great condition, so we are feeding an awful lot more than we'd like to be doing, and I'm deliberating whether we should keep them in a separate field or not. So if it wasn't for the feed, twins, triplets, everything, I'd put them all in the same field, because they're all marked up. You can tell what they're going to have because they've been scanned, and we know what they're going to have. And it took me years and years to reach that position of putting them all in the same field. But the time it saves in endlessly walking. My husband once gave me a Fitbit thing to wear during lambing, and I was walking 15 kilometers a day lambing until we put them into one field, and I chopped it down to 7, which was great. So yeah, there are lots of things that you need to think about in having them in that one field. I completely agree. And this year, I think if we feel we need to feed a big bunch, we'll probably end up having 2 fields.
Well, I mean, I want to try that. First time lambing out, so and I'm trying to do everything as simply as possible in year 1, so making lots of changes, and then work out what the problems are and deal with them, rather than try and think of all the problems in advance, and then, you know, I'm trying to design it so it works for me. So I'm starting with sort of as minimal intervention as I can, which means I've got to be very reactive, because obviously things can change quite quickly. What was my question? Sorry, I had another question. I lost it.
Before you ask a question, Wojciech, I've been dying to meet you. It's so nice to see your face, because you're so active on the WhatsApp group. I'd love you to tell everybody about how you're doing your lambing, because I mean, sometimes I have to skim through those. There's so many things, but you've taken a very unusual approach to your lambing this year. Maybe people might like to hear what you're doing.
On the breeding, as in the tuck breeding?
Yeah.
So well, that came out of a YouTube conversation with Richard Perkins and a chap called Bjorn, who he knows, which first introduced me to the topic of mob breeding, which was basically, so I was trying to design a system where I've got one group of animals for as long as I possibly can have one group of animals. So that's flirting with cattle and sheep, and a couple of ponies, which I found have been quite good for dung beetles, I think. So the ponies aren't always in there. There are friends' ponies, they come in and out. But yeah, so the idea behind this was leaving your well, this year I'm going to leave all of my ram lambs entire, because actually they did really well, and I'll separate them when they get to maturity, obviously. But last year I lambed in the shed, and just picked the 40 best, well, basically all the best ram lambs. I ended up with 40 out of a lot that got on their feet the quickest and looked the healthiest and suckled and did all, you know, did everything they should do, all from twins, you know, all with pretty much good mothers. And so I did that, and then I whittled that down to 22 in the end. So after letting them, you know, raising them with the mob, at sexual sort of maturity level, took them out, left them again for, I think it was a few weeks, and then when we were ready, when we thought we were ready to cut them down, we took out the ones that were the weakest and were left with 22. It wasn't necessarily the biggest, it was just anything that was dealing very well with no worming, that was looked strong and decent, and, you know, so we'll see. So they did a good job. You know, we ended up with far fewer empties this year, quite a lot of singles, but then the ewes aren't used to being lambed so late, because we've been lambing indoors. So their cycles, hopefully next year that'll have adjusted a bit. But I was pleased. A lot more singles then, but still over 100, so out of 270, over 120 doubles, and fewer triplets than we would normally have. And I was debating, I think Ian mentioned, I was debating selling the triplets, actually. I thought that was quite a smart idea. But then someone said to me, well, they might not have triplets next year. so I don't know. I'm going to keep them anyway and just see how things go. And then again, but this year I'll keep all of the ram lambs entire. I'll be looking in the field for those stronger ram lambs that are got that zest for life, which is going to be a judgment call and more difficult to do in the field. And then do the same process, but with all the ram lambs this time. Mark up the ones that I think are good or the best, and then see how they progress. They come round on my system about every 6 weeks. Sometimes it's longer, and so I tend to bring them all in and just run them over the scale. So I've got a bit of a measure for how their weight gain's doing as well. Yeah, so there's a bit of concern from, I mean, my father's a parasitologist actually, but he knows a bit about genetics, and my sister's a vet, and she's a bit concerned about whether the genetic pool will reduce, reduce doing that. It does mean I don't have to have any ram lambs hanging around or buy any in. I can hopefully choose my genetics. I've still got to work out there's a lot of emphasis on female, on the female mother genetics as well, which is something that I really need to start thinking about more. But this is how I'm thinking on the male side. But we've got deer here as well, which have closed flock for a very long time. And there's a lot of inbreeding there. The main thing that I think interesting here is that you'll never get brothers and sisters, and you'll never get fathers and daughters breeding. You might get mother and son, but the likelihood when you've got 22 plus ram lambs in with 270 ewes of mother and son breeding are probably quite low. And the idea being then that the culling policy has to deal with it. So that's the theory. I'm not an expert. That's what I'm trying.
Anyone got anything I'd like to say on that? Charlotte?
Sorry, Pen's got her hand up, and then I also just wanted to ask Fidelity a question from the chat, which I think can also go to the whole group, which is, do you use electric fencing when you're lambing? So maybe if Pen goes first, and if anyone else wants to dive in, please feel free to type in the chat or put your hand up as well.
I was just going to say that for female genetics, one of the ways that it's been done in some of Europe or Eastern Europe is only take tup lambs from, say, ewes that have had at least 5 successful litters or 6 successful litters, and if they've lasted in your flock for 6 years with twins or whatever your selection is for keeping your ewes, then if you keep your tups from those, then you've probably selected for good ewe genetics.
Right, thank you. I'll make
That's
a note.
a good point. Yeah.
And that's what I do, is like I castrate my ram lambs, but when I've got fantastic ewes that really keep their body condition with no worms, on grass, those are the ones I keep tups from. When they're about 6 years old, when they've had about 6 or 7 lambs. Twins every year.
I've read about a similar system where he started with an A and B flock, but rather than having an A flock and then things that don't perform go into the B flock, they started with everything is in the B flock until they've had 2 or 3 crops, and then they go to the A flock if they've proved that they can actually deal, and you would only keep replacements from your A flock. So you have almost like a commercial flock that's at the bottom, and you move things up, and it's a slower process. I think it's a slow process, but quite effective in the long run, I thought.
Well, I've got rid of lameness. I have no scouring used. It's fantastic, and with rotational grazing, they keep great body condition on nothing, because that's the ones I've selected for. So if you select really hard, you end up with a narrowing. But it then, now I'm building up the flock again from these 4 ewes that seem to be doing fantastically.
What breed of ewe have you got, Pen?
Oh, me, I'm Hebridean, so they're as tough as nails anyway. So they get fat on mob grazing. They're no one's seen as fat Hebrideans as I've got, because they're even though they're just on pasture, but they cope on anything.
Do they have multiple births?
No, my percentage is normally about 175%, 180%.
Wow. Yeah.
So most of them are so normally only the first year lambers that are singles. Most of them others are most of the others normally twins.
Whilst we're on genetics and stuff, and because there's a lot to talk about on mob grazing, electric fencing, which we'll move on to, Do any of you have views on breeds and things? I mean, we for instance have clins, and thinking about this, the point that you're just making about old sheep, we happen to got quite an old lot of sheep, and I bought in a bunch of clin cross Romneys, and at 7 years old they are all holding their weight a huge amount better than the clins. That would suggest to me that we are perhaps better off having the crosses on our farm than the clins if we want to. Yeah, that they're probably doing better than the clins are. Hannah, and then Pen. Hannah, do you want to say something? You got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say about breeds, because it's quite interesting. There's lots of conversation about meat and you know, aiming for meat, but I have, you know, there's other parameters, other yields obviously. So I put a lot of emphasis on wool as well, and I shear my own by hand with the old scissors, and then take them up to the spinning mill, and so have, you know, a really useful product to sell is the balls of wool, and also sheepskins. And so I deliberately go for a real Heinz 57. I'm really Puritan with my cows, original population Lincoln Red, and then for the sheep I've got a real mixture of Shetlands, Lincoln Longwool, Leicester Longwool, Jacob, a Wiltshire Horn, Manx are in there, and I'll just keep kind of selecting different rams from different breeds to kind of go, oh, let's go for a bit of this and go for a bit of that. So I'm looking for, you know, good fleece, individuality, good feet, good mothering, good fertility, you know, worm resistance, but also, and it's interesting, we've had this conversation, I think, on the Mob Lammers as well, about flavour, that you know, there really is, I believe, I've tasted a very different flavour between different breeds, and it's an interesting one, that I think the best tasting meat is often from the smaller, more wild sheep that are less popular with the big commercial suppliers. So it's quite interesting, the kind of, you know, how many different variety breeds there are and what we can kind of use and play with, I think.
Very interesting. Any Pen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the breeds, I mean, I mean, some of you will know, I'm the facilitator for the Peak District. So we've got one of our farmers who breeds sheep. He was always crossing onto a Suffolk tup, and he moved from his British pedigree animal to a New Zealand grass-fed that got grass-fed genetic, what he called grass-fed genetics, so been selected on grass. And he then found that his animals did much better. So if you choose your animals from stock that are that come from a grass-fed background, whether it's the New Zealand genetics or from people who are selecting for that particular trait rather than feeding them a load of concentrate, you'll probably get better stock out of it that way. So that's probably why. It's not so much that you're choosing blends, but it's the type of the animal that you're choosing rather than the breed itself.
Yeah. Anybody else got anything they want to say on breeds or genetics? Ian.
Yeah, I did. I had clins, and I think they were quite well suited to a pasture fed system. Obviously, the sort of triplet side of things could be an issue, but as Roger said, I said I sold my triplets the last couple of years. Only repeat triplets, not first timers, but repeats. I often found repeats were repeats, and their daughters would repeat, and their daughters' daughters. So I had a particular couple of strains in there that were very triplety. So they, after a few years, the first year I had them, I thought they were amazing, and then the fourth year I sold them all. So I think you can definitely select to find the ones that you want and ones that work in your system. If you do weigh them and your body condition score them, and you cull out the ones that can't keep condition on a pasture only system. And I wanted to jump back just a little bit to the lambing in a single flock with singles and twins. I found my biggest issue is actually on that system with the singles would be way too big, because you're providing quality feed for twins at grass in April. It's too good for singles. So I'd put singles on a bowling green as best I could, or I'd electric fence them into one end of a field and keep them there and have them tight. And as soon as they've lambed, kick them into the next field. but they moved them through the fence or through a gate or something like that, so that they could get the benefit of the better grass. But I wasn't keen on having singles in on decent grass because lambs are just enormous.
That's very true. Ian, what time of year did you lamb?
April.
Yeah.
First
So
April on.
yeah, I can see that that's a risk, which, yeah, you'd need to be careful of. David, you've got your hand up.
Hello there. Yes, thank you. I would just say I read a book, and I know others who are doing a lot of mob breeding, sorry. And as long as there's not more than a 50% share of genetics between the sire and the dam, you shouldn't get too many problems. I can't remember the name of the book I read, but there's not very much about line breeding that's published. But it was a breeder from America, I think, from memory, and he had Hereford cattle. But it wasn't. Well, you probably could. That'll probably be enough information to Google it to find what it was called.
Yeah.
Could I ask it's maybe a question for later on. But I hear about floods, people talking about them, but I was wondering how that works practically for managing grass, and also just having everybody in a big heap. And also what the limit is to it. Is there a certain amount of animals that you go past that, you're better having a cattle and sheep in different mobs? But I'm happy to come back to that question.
Sorry, could I add on to David's question just then? Does anyone know of any illnesses or diseases that anything can get by being run in a flurd? Because I've got very vague memories of that being the case, that there's issues where if cows are with lactating sheep, they can pick up certain things. So that's one of the reasons I was a bit cautious about it.
There is something there, and there are certain diseases that can be passed from one to the other. I think there's some feet conditions as well, but I'm afraid I'm not.
What was the one that brings to mind?
Ian, is that you? Is that you answering?
Johne's disease. Surely that could be an issue.
Johne's.
Yeah.
There was one in particular that I think would be. It could lead to quite a quick problem, especially for cattle. Which wasn't like, I know it wasn't like a Johne's or anything like that, but it was something where that said they had one particular flurd that had quite a few problems with it, but I cannot remember for the life of me what it was, so it's not very useful. But that was one of the things I just wanted to check if anyone else had any particular problems with that.
Let's stick on the flurd thing. Wojciech.
Yeah, so I mean, it's new, it's still all very recent thing that we're doing. So zoonotic diseases, I think, isn't it, that transfer between different species. I heard of the one about lambing and cattle. I spoke to my vet about it, and he said the chances are so low. He said it is a possibility, but in however many years he's practiced, he's not come across it where people have been doing it. And he said that the chances are low, but something to keep an eye on. I think it's still too early for me to say. I mean, we had some aborted calves, and we panicked. We had 3 in a row. One, she had twins, and I think she had trouble, and that was unfortunate. The next one, she'd actually aborted last year, so we only just had these cattle in for well, it'll be nearly 2 years. It'll be 2 years this summer. So again, we haven't got a lot of history with the herd. And the third one, we bought her in this year, and I don't know what happened there. Anyway, we sent the calf off. We panicked because we thought, gosh, we've got a problem. The tests they do, they did a full range of tests. It was all negative, which is good, but how much can you rely on it? Don't know. We've now started having calves, and they're all coming out fine at the moment. So thankfully, and the percentage-wise, the losses are probably about right for the number of cattle we had. So it just happened; they all happened at the end that year. So far, difficult. Not seeing anything. We've had a bit of ringworm in the cattle this year. So, but you know, that doesn't seem to have transferred to the sheep. Again, it's one of the things I want to monitor and learn from. The reason I put them all together is because for moving, it's just so easy, and for monitoring and for you know, it's a lot easier for me. It allows me to get the maximum rest I can on the ground in the way I'm running the system at the moment, which is most of our systems continually evolving. So, you know, you start with one thing, oh, I'm going to do that, and then, oh, now I want to do, and it just keeps evolving and evolving. So, but yeah, I'll definitely let people know if there's anything that that we can categorically say is down to that. I mean, my plan for that is hopefully just good nutrition and good genetics will deal with a lot of those ailments and problems. But
what about Wojciech when you're moving? So one of the things, barriers in my head, and in reality I've tried a little bit about having a flood, is having to move several strands of wire, for instance. So do you keep your lambs behind 2 or 3 strands of wire? How do you find just moving that compared to one, which is so incredibly easy and quick to do?
Well, so most of my fields are quite big. They're about 6.5, 7 hectares, right? And they're all fenced, and they all adjoin each other, so go round in a clock effectively. So it's very easy to move things. I just open the gates the next field, and then I can partition those depending on how much I feel I want them to have. You know, so in the summer when I've got lots, I tend to do it a lot smaller. I might do 1-day moves, 2-day moves. I try to keep everything to 3-day moves maximum, but sometimes in the winter, when, you know, we do put out hay and silage. So sometimes in the winter when the ground conditions aren't great, you know, we'll give them the whole 6 hectares. So I'm only really having to put up one fence on that system. What I was trying to do was I'm trying to build the flerd, and I don't think I've got the right balance of sheep and cattle yet, but I'm trying to build the flerd to fit the field sizes that I want to make my moves easier. So at the moment, if you said it was 3 hectares, so a hectare a day is the size I want to get to, and I'm just trying to work out, you know, if I can do that way. And then that way I'm only having to put up 1 fence a week and take down 1 fence a week, and I tend to use 3 strands when I've got lambs around. Touchwood, last year we hardly had any, and I just really shocking fences, really. Tightness was awful. And they seem to respect it quite well. I had more problems the year before where I was keeping them a lot tighter, but if I'm giving them a good amount of room and moving them every sort of 3 days maximum, they've tended to respect the fence quite well. Yeah, so that's.
So a question that's come in here, which relates to that, Wojciech, which is, well, you've talked about how many lines of electric fence you're using, but also what are people's thoughts generally on the balance of numbers of sheep versus cattle? And I'd like to just chuck in there, what about grass height? When you're grazing you're grazing lambs, ewes, calves and cows. What on earth how do you decide about your grass height? And so if maybe Wojciech, and then David and Hannah, I've seen you've both got your hands up. It's great. I'll come to you. Don't worry. In due course.
So to answer that, grass height, I've just, you know, whatever the grass height is when they come round on the system, they go in. It's no more technical than that at the moment. The sheep have done well on it. The cows did, or you know, at the moment I'm working with another farmer, tenant farmer, who and we're looking at how we can combine things. So I do have the ability, and quite lucky in this sense, have the ability to move stock over to him. He's not got the same sort of system as me, but we're combining and changing systems. So he wanted to take back and I'm sort of letting him sort of really make the main decisions on the cattle operation at the moment. So he took back the cows and calves and left me with this year's calves, so the young stock for this year. And yeah, they're not, it's so difficult to tell, because at the moment it's the worst time of year, I think, for stock that's been outdoors, because the conditions of, you know, they've just got through the winter. They're, you know, so it's difficult to really judge how well they're doing. They're not doing fantastically, but they're not doing terribly. So we might tweak that next year, but I don't know. And again, I'm probably going to drop the sheep and build up the cattle numbers. I'm at the moment 270 breeding. I was about 320 before. I probably want to drop down to maybe 150 or 100 sheep, and then have more cattle is probably where I'm going to go. But I don't know.
David.
Do you find having cattle in the like a milking yow needs a lot of nutrition? She's more or less a dairy cow, or coming close to a dairy cow, whereas a cow doesn't need so much nutrition. Do the yows, a yow carrying two lambs at foot at peak lactation, how do you get enough nutrition into them and make sure they get enough grass? Do you have well, the way it sounds like you're moving everything in the one block all the time, there's not like a creep fence, if you like a single electric fence to allow yows and lambs through to get first pick, and then cows are coming chomping in behind. I just wonder about, well, anyway, getting enough nutrition into these yows.
Yeah, I mean, the ewes and lambs, the sheep have done really well this year on the system. I've been really impressed with them. So I don't make any calculations on that. I don't. It's just a case of, you know, keep moving them around, giving them different things to choose from, and just keeping an eye on anything that, you know, dealing with problems as they come up is really the thing. And I haven't, touched wood, on the sheep, it's been really good this last year. So I don't know.
What's your residual when you take a mob out?
Well, I suppose it depends on the time of year, but I mean, and how tall it was and how much trample. I mean, sometimes it looks like hardly anything, and then sometimes it's, but it's going to be pretty low. It's going to be, you know, I don't know, it's going to be a few centimeters anyway. It's not going to be nibbled right down.
Okay, but how long are your lays in? Like, how many years are you getting out of them? Are you finding the herbs are okay in that?
So the lays at the moment, we're only on our second year with herbal lays.
Okay.
So it's a learning curve. This year, I'm really interested to see what it's going to look like this year. Last year, I probably grazed it too early, but it came really well in the summer. Still seeing lots of clover in there. Chicory might have taken a bit of a hit grazing it in the sort of October time, autumn time. Apparently it doesn't do too well, but it is coming back. So I don't know, it's going to be interesting on that, just to see how it, I mean, I'll end up with what I end up with, and then I'll build the system around that. The reason I put the herbal lays in was because Severn Trent were offering a good grant to put them in, and I thought I'll try this out and see what happens. I've got to maintain them for 4 years for that grant that I had for them. And then after that, I'll just, whatever survives, I'll try and build the stock around what I've got that's working well. Yeah.
Do you have?
Sorry.
David.
Do you have Timothy and Coxfoot and
Yes.
Tall Fescue in the herb in the mix?
Yeah, well? It's got, I can't remember what it's, 20 odd different herbs and grasses, and about 7 or 8 of them are grasses, I think.
Okay, and are you putting on fertilizer?
No.
Right, perfect. Good.
Not put any fertilizer on last year, and won't do this year on the grass. I mean, that's the reason why I'm trying to rotate them all year round, which does create some problems. Again, it's only second year, but this year we have continually rotated. May not do that next year. Might try and keep them for a small period on like a Sabbath patch or something like that. But don't know. We'll see how this spring comes. But yeah, so trying to keep those nutrients going all year round. But then the sacrifice could be the diversity in the sward, or maybe overgrazing.
You only overgraze them if you go too frequently.
Well, I've 3 months rest pretty much. At a push, if I speed it up, it sort of can be 2.5 months. So it's once a season. Every field is getting grazed once a season for 3 days. If I do the 3-day. Through the winter, that can be a bit too much for some fields, because some fields you're coming in, you know, winter, and then so that's where some fields are getting more of a rest because they're coming midwinter, and then they're not, you know. So still working it all out.
What just could, sorry, I don't want to hog the.
No,
hog
keep
the
going,
show.
David, it's fine.
But what clovers are in your mixture? Annual clovers at all?
Yeah, the what? Sorry.
Annual clovers or biannual clovers?
I think there's a mixture. I can post up the seed mix on the chat probably. I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'll have a quick look for it.
Sorry, was
Let-
the vast majority of that rotation in herbal lays then, as opposed to
No,
permanent pasture?
no. There are 3 fields, so just over 20 hectares in herbal lays, and the rest is permanent pasture.
Okay, cool. Do you think there's much of a difference with how the lambs respond to the permanent pasture versus the herbal lays, or so going in when it's more cover on a herbal lay versus permanent pasture?
Well, so one thing I have noticed is definitely I was monitoring the FECs on the ram lambs, and they did really well on the diverse mixture. Presumably the chicory and the samphawood hasn't done so well, but other stuff in there that has anthelmintic properties, that seemed to work. In terms of, I can't graze one of the agreements is a biodiversity thing. I can't graze it from the 1st of May to the end of August. That's right, yeah. So 3 months I've got to have, no, it's the beginning of August. So I've got 3 months where I can't graze the herbal lay. So basically it ends up, I get the stock on it to get that spring bit off it. I'm actually going to lamb on it this year is my plan. And then they're going to come off. And then by the time they get back in, it's way up here. So I can't really comment on how it performs in between, but they get a really good job of trampling and eating it down, and loads of seeds coming up. That's been a real success. Lots of trampled matter down on the ground. That's been good. Lots of worm activity. So that's in year 1 observation only though, but.
Great, let's move on to Ian. Well, Hannah and Ian have both got their hands up. Ian, would you like to go first?
I was just coming back to your question about moving 3 strands or single strands, and obviously I think it sounded like you were worried that moving 3 strands takes too long. And I wondered whether you put 3 onto single reel, because that does make it really quick. Just makes it the same.
So what I've done this year, Ian, is I've just invested in a Kiwitech system that go on the quad bike, which will take the 3 wheels. So I personally find it heavy carrying 3 wheels and all the posts walking across the field, and the reels. So on the Kiwitech system, you have 3 individual reels with their strands on, and unless they're exactly the same size, they all wind up at different times. It's an absolute ball ache, basically. But I'm sure I'm just not working it properly.
I've apart from once or twice having to tension, so the way I set mine up is I have a single end post.
Yeah.
3 strands running off it, different colours.
Yeah.
Going onto the single reel, onto 1 reel at the end.
Oh, right.
And then a geared reel, and you can hand wind that straight in. Just walk straight towards the fence, wind it all in, never disconnect the end post, so it's always tight.
Yeah.
And then just run it straight out again, and then wind it back in again. And it's, apart from every now and again I have to maybe tighten one of the strands, they get a bit slack, different tensions or whatever. You then have 3 on 1, and if you power up one of the lines, it powers all 3 because they're wrapped around each other on the wheel. It doesn't have as much punch as individual strands, but it was a total game changer in terms of gifting sheep. I moved from basically having, I put a wrapper line down the middle of the field and then break it that way.
That's an amazing tip, Ian. I mean, and to have the 3 different colours as well. That's so clever.
I had 2. I have a white, orange, white, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then if when you're walking it out, because you put the end post in and then you walk out with the reel, if you clip in a single fence post and walk that out with it, hold the fence post in one hand and the reel in the other, you can walk it all the way to the end, and when you stick the stake in, clip it onto the fence at the end, you have all 3 completely untangled, and then you just walk straight back along the line, sticking your posts out, which and I now have 9 of those things, and I use them for. I was going to put out a couple of fences today, and I was going to get the wrapper out, and actually I couldn't be bothered, so I just take two of the other fences out. And obviously you're limited to how long it can be, so about 150 meters, 170 meters on a single reel, as opposed to like a 500 meter reel. But in terms of my field size, most of them that will stretch. You know, it's 120 meters, and that's the field size done. I can, if I'm going crossways, and if I've got a particularly big field, I break it lengthways and then move them around the grid. It's
Brilliant. If anyone else has got any particular tips like this evening, I think those are so useful. They're worth their weight in gold, these sorts of snippets of information. Hannah, over to you.
Hello. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the fence strand bits as well. The grazing, lambing in a mob, in a flerd. Then the last couple of years that I did it, we like David just said about having the one strand, one high strand that stops the cows, but the sheep can go under. But actually did it the other way round from David was suggesting there, that I had the cows ahead. And so they could take the long grass, and then the sheep could go ahead if they wanted to and go into the front cell. But I had a number of different, I found when the flerd was very small, like, a couple of cows and a handful of sheep, then it was easy to just all have them in one cell together. It's really simple. And as it grew, I started doing multiple cells. So it is a bit of faff with fencing, but like I've had similar setups to, as Ian just mentioned, and also the Kiwitech multiple reel, though I may have thrown it across a field at one point in frustration as I'd really like to take it to groundswell. If people are at groundswell and we can have like a Kiwitech like head scratch, I've definitely set mine up in a left-handed way. But the one strand thing is what, cows and hungry ewes that either have lambed and have got really healthy lambs and independent lambs, or haven't lambed yet, they'll be happy to move forward. And any animal that's wanting to, like, feeling that they're going to go into labour, will go back, and they can go back under the wire. I think a lot of it depends on sensible breed. There's something I want to say as well with a flerd, is it really depends on having a docile breed of cows. You wouldn't want to have crazy cows in there, good old, Herefords or Lincoln Reds that are just really calm and gentle and used to you, makes a massive difference. But yeah, so having the ability for the sheep that are wanting to lamb to be able to go back, they'll go back to a back corner. And I've not seen any of my ewes try and start lambing in with the cows. They'll all go back where they feel safe. And if they have the opportunity to, they'll go under the wire and go and lamb back. And then the other bit that came up on the thread on the WhatsApp group was when I'm mobbing now just the sheep, when they're lambing, the cows are off somewhere else now, then I have the pregnant ewes ahead and then the maternity unit behind, and so I have 2 cells moving on each day, and it's that thing that it's much easier to move a ewe, so I'll let a ewe lamb in there unless she's got any problems or any reason to be back. It makes it really easy to spot anyone that's just produced lambs while you've been away, because they're the only lambs in that group. But then once I've checked that they've got milk and everything's okay, I'll move the ewe with the lambs back into the section behind, into kind of effectively yesterday's grazing, and that's the mother and baby unit. And the size of those cells obviously adapt as lambing continues, depending on what proportion of the flock is in either. But the trick is letting the lambing field have a really good long recovery, and so there's plenty of grass, and so by the time the ewe is coming behind, with her lambs, there's still plenty of grass left from the ones ahead. All of that.
Thank you, Hannah. That's great. David, you've got something else you wanted to say?
I'm just playing with the sheep at the moment with the mob grazing, but I've got lanes. I have like a semi-permanent lane that goes at least 100 meters long, and then I have side shoots off that, and then move that every day or every second day. And I just have it with one reel, but I have four wires going across, and I have it tangled in a certain way. So the first wire as the end post, if you like, that's in the top, and then at the top of the permanent one, the next one goes between the second top wire, and it comes below it as well, so it doesn't get tangled if I release that end. And then I go back across and do the middle between the two, between the top two and the bottom two. The wire goes out and then back and doesn't get tangled if I decided to release that one. And then when I come back another end, it goes between the bottom two wires. So again, I can untangle any end, and I don't have a problem with all the wires getting tangled up. But I've not been brave enough to cut wires if others have done with having 3 in the one reel. My wires are too new, so I'm not brave enough yet to do that.
Ian, it sounds like you'd recommend that you can do that. You look very happy about that.
Cutting wires.
Yeah, so you just know you've got your 3 wires exactly.
Yeah, I just bought wires on a roll and reeled them onto blank geared reel, so I didn't feel like I was cutting anything. So I just started off with rolled out brand new wire and put it straight onto a roll, and that's yeah, I think it's just the middle lane was what I was thinking. Yeah, is why it makes it a lot easier having really short breaks that are only, so you've got a big central field break and then lots of little ones, and they go down one side and then they work their way back down the other side, and that just makes life really easy because you're only putting out 5 or 6 posts, and you can whip that out in a minute, whatever. It's just no time at all. And as long as you've got 3 of them, so you've got a leapfrog, there's always the next day's set up already. It's water's the issue though, isn't it? I mean, this time of year it's not an issue, but water in peak lactation on a hot sunny day is an issue, because unless you've got loads of amazing Kiwitech tanks and things like that, or you want a header tank system so you can use that system, which I'm not, it's always been a bit of an issue. I for the last few years have been using sort of mobile bowsers, which I'd put in the zone ahead, so that it would just stick out underneath the electric fence, just a little trough for them to drink from. But I'm so bored of that. We've invested in a whole load of water this year, a bit of new mains piping, because I just can't be doing it anymore. Sick of it. I'm sick of dragging water around in the summer.
Yeah. So Rachel.
How do you catch a sheep when they're surrounded by electric fences?
In what, to treat one?
Yes, or just if you've got one that's you want to check the condition of the ewes, or there's needing to give something a hand at lambing time, which you hope you don't want to do too many of that.
At lambing time, I set stock a field with singles on one side of the track, twins on the other side of the track, and I drive through the field. I always have a couple of catching pens at either end of the field, so I can walk a pregnant ewe into a catching pen at the bottom, in the bottom corner. Also, luckily, we've got a farm track that runs up the middle. There's a field on one side, field on the other side, and a zone in the middle where I can walk them into, and it's secure. So I can walk a single ewe in there. I can put pinchers in there, those kind of ones that are just a pain in the ass that steal stuff. I just put them there till they lamb. But generally, I will just drive through. I drive through the field first thing in the morning and last thing at night, and do everything else from the track as best I can. If I have to catch something, then I'll probably have to. The easiest way I find, if you imagine the screen, is I would drive the gator in at an angle to the fence like that, with the trailer behind it, and then I'll try and get the other way. Try and get the ewe into my fishing net, basically into a little catch zone. Walk her.
That's a solid fence. You're putting it.
So the boundary fence. So I'll just catch a single ewe like that. You can trick them into going into the fishing net, basically, and that's enough. Especially with a pregnant ewe, I've got a half chance. I wouldn't have a chance with a fit ewe, but pregnant ewe I can. I don't have a catching dog.
Does anyone got a clever way of doing it when you've got all electric fences all around? Because any time I've tried that, it's just blasted chaos. Sheep jump out, they want to jump back in to be with their chums. but I can't get a hold of them to get their condition.
I probably wouldn't try and grab one in the field to get its condition.
I will. Well, I'm trying to monitor. I'm feeding them correctly. That's my
right. Okay.
So, well, when they're covering wool in the autumn time, well,
I've got what I did, David. When I started off, before I started doing mob grazing on the whole farm, if it can even call it that, because a mob's not really that tight. I started with 80 lambs and put them on and moved them every single day on a small area all winter. And I found that occasionally we wanted to catch them to look at them. So what I did was, because I think that's what you're doing, is you're moving them, are you, from one cell to the next cell adjacent?
Yep.
So I came up with a system. I did have a boundary fence though, but you could do this without a boundary fence. Is just put some hurdles alongside. So make like a corridor of hurdles to move them through, and then stop each group, check them, let them through, and you can do it. You could try and do something like that. It did work. I'm trying to think exactly how I did it, but I had a good system because one time we got them all, we wormed them all through that way, and it worked quite well. So basically, just set up a little corridor with some hurdles, and then try and stop if you after a particular one. That's the challenge. If you're after a particular one, isn't it?
They're like a flock of Labradors up to the point that you want to catch one, and then they go back to where they were, half feral and heading for the fences.
Should we? So, Ian, you've got your hand up still, or is that left over from before? Yeah. Have we finished? Have we finished talking about fencing and electric fencing tips? And anyone else? Oh, Rachel. Yes, sorry, Rachel. Yeah.
Could I just ask about what do you do regarding grass that grows up to the fence and then stops the fencer working? Because people are moving, they seem to be changing the size of the cells. Because so what I do in the summer is I set all my cells out, knowing how many sheep I've got, and I can't really change that because I've mown where the 3 strands are going to go. But I mean, on a big field, you can't be mowing it all the time. What does anybody else do?
Anyone got any tips on that?
I just drive through the quad. When I'm putting out the fence, you can always drive a line through long grass, put the fence in the tire track mark, and then that's good for a day or two, and then they'll move on. And so as I set my
but the chicory is really high and it just falls, everything.
So in a big herbal lay, you mean?
In a herbal lay.
I still probably drive through, and it has caused me some issues. With lambs going under, breaking through fences and going through and things like that. The ewes respect the fences, but the lambs.
Also with the water, I take it off a trough, the line off a trough, and then I just put a whole lot of plastic pipe up the center of a field attached to the trough. But I mean, my fields are 5 hectares.
That's what I did last summer, actually. So I started dragging pipe around instead.
But then I tap off different places off the one up the middle, and then just move a little mobile trough. Anyway, that's what I do.
Ali, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Several things. The electric fencing we use here, and we moved to that 2 years ago, shamelessly stealing several of Ian's ideas, but we don't have any issue with lambs sort of running through. I just move my 2 wires up and down dependent, and I found that pregnant ewes don't jump, so there's no point having a really high wire, so I can just move that down for the lambs, so that gap is lower. And then when it comes to grass, and you were saying that you were having trouble of sort of making lines, I'm within, again, having sub 50 or sub 100 meter runs because then you can very easily drive it down, or you know, even the hand sickle, it can work. You know, I've got one of these Austrian sides, and that's my sort of bit of workout in the morning if I need one. Or if it's a long division field break fence, like David's sort of suggesting, you know, I'll crank out a strimmer or even a topper on the back of the tractor the week before, and I'll smash it down, put up the fence before the sheep are even in the field. And by the time I've left the field, it's still nowhere near, and I can probably do that once in the season, just keeping it low. And that deals with all of that brush touching the fence issues. I've heard of some people using flamethrowers, the sort of weed guns, to burn a line, but I'm not really keen on that, because obviously you're damaging your field. Or anyway, that's sort of my bit.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you. So if we move on a bit from fences now, there's a few. So what about condition scoring ewes and things? If we perhaps think about the actual condition of the ewes and connected with that, how in reality, how many of your lambs do you get off before Christmas? How many do you keep on? You know, is this pasture-based system producing the sorts of finish that we have always learnt, you know, to produce them to, if we're doing it very conventionally? Perhaps if anyone got any points or thoughts about that, or anything that they'd like to share on those sorts of aspects of production. Do any of you rely a lot on condition scoring, and you know, do you regularly do it, or is it just something you just do coming up to tupping or something like that?
We do it 3 times a year. We do it at weaning. We do it at just like a week or 2 before tupping, and then sort of mid-February we're April lambers. So when we're doing our heptivac, and or if we're low on cobalt here, so we bolus. So when we're doing that, we just tie it in. And so we you know, we do it as part of a handling situation. So we're not trying to catch sheep in the middle of a field.
Yeah, I'm with Ali on that. I do it exactly whenever they're in for any other reason. I just put my hands on the back, and I'm only interested in the ones that have got low scores. So I'll only make a note of those to think what I'm going to do with them, if there are any. But every time they're in the pens, I put my hands on the back.
So would you cull against that pen?
I have in the past. Yes, I tend to. It's one of my things that I use for choosing to get rid of the ewes. Was if they hadn't gone through the winter well, you know, even if I make a note whether they're carrying singles or twins, but it'll be one of the things I'll consider. I try and consider trying to get rid of, say, the lower 10% every year, because then you're always building up the best.
What about people's culling decisions? Has anyone got anything else that they cull against that they think is important? What sort of age do you cull your sheep? Do you have a set age, or do you wait till they're looking too ropey? How do you all make decisions about that? Ali?
We do a kind of 3-strike rule. So we have various things of how much they're scouring. Sometimes we might bring their age into it if we find that they're particularly troublesome for another reason. But generally we just try and think of 3 things. If they have bad feet that's genetic, if they're scouring and they're old, then we might get rid of them. But we are running quite a small flock, to be fair, for most people, so we kind of have less reasons to cull.
Anyone got anything else on culling? Ian?
I was definitely culling on feet. I did that for a couple of years. We bought in stock when I started the flock, and within 2 years that dramatically improved. Anything that basically was treated twice within a year or 18 months was out. That made a big difference to handling. I got sick of handling sheep and injecting sheep in the first 2 years. I thought it was pretty disappointing, actually, how many came in with issues. So that improved it. I wouldn't cull for old age. I'd only cull for bad performance in terms of whether they're lambs. The lambs that didn't make a decent 8-week weight was something I was culling for, or moving into the commercial flock and then culling at a later date. So it's only, that's, and things that can't get back into condition. If they're not back in condition by tupping, then they've got to go. There's no point putting it up with them.
David, and then Wojciech.
Is anybody using any Welsh mountain ewes in the system at all?
I'm sure we must have got members who are using Welsh Mountain ewes, but just seeing if Nick Miller's still on this call. He was. Hold on, I think he's gone. Yeah, there's a member. Are you? So Nick Miller was, but I don't think he's still here.
It's just they're cheap, and they've got bigger carcasses or bigger bodies than a Shetland, which are even cheaper, and they're almost an easy care.
So is that, what breed have you got, David?
Easy cares.
Easy. Oh, how do you find them?
Oh, awesome. But I'm just practicing, and I'm very much on a small scale. I'm not done it for very long compared to the experts that are on the call. So I better not say too much.
Well, just out of interest, how much does an easy care ewe weigh, and have you yet done it? What weight did the lambs finish at?
I don't know, because they're due to give birth for the first time,
Right.
of the ones I've bought, but the style I've got will be no different than Clint's. So you can kill them at 21 dead. So I made a point in getting good ones. So
yeah. Wojciech, I think, were you perhaps going to answer the culling question?
No, yeah, I was just going to mention that similar to others, just on condition really, and just checking them when they come in. But there was one comment, I can't remember, I read it from a lady who was farming in America somewhere. I think she had quite a lot, and I'm sure she had more of a complex culling policy than this, but it's made me look out for this when I bring them in. She said normally the back 10 or 15 sheep coming in are no good when you bring them in. So if you bring them into your yard in a nice long line, if you've taken them a bit of a distance, you've got the stragglers at the back. And so I've been meaning to do this. I haven't quite done this, but I have been watching, is try and close the gate, get the first gate on the yard closed and get that last group in and have a good look at them, check them, see if they're the same group that are sort of coming in at the end. Anyway, that's what this lady said. I thought was quite interesting.
With Texel throat, some people run the sheep hard and find the breathless ones and get rid of them, and that's a quick way of finding, if you're running Texels, that could be a way of getting rid of those before they start causing a problem.
A few questions. I'm going to bunch all these together. What do any of you have views on tail docking? We've actually just bought in some shearlings that had got long tails. We've never done that before. So tail docking, castration, and also what about crutching, spending a lot of time crutching your ewes? Anyone got any views or thoughts on any of those subjects?
no to them all. Just let them do it.
No to them all. So you wouldn't tail dock or crutch or castrate?
Well, I purposely bought from a flock as well that doesn't do that too. So it's just something that I don't need to do. But the top lambs will have to come out in August.
Yeah. I understand that they'll put on weight a huge amount more quickly if they're not castrated or tail docked. Any experience of that?
So, yeah, just 1 year, obviously. But very impressed. I was told that they would the entire lambs would put on good weight and then potentially not be as good or something. I'm really impressed in comparison to saying it's only 1 year, it's only one group. I don't have long-term experience, but I was really impressed. I'm going to try and, I don't really like putting rubber rings on tails and I think the build-up probably such a small thing, but just the whole idea of it just doesn't seem right unless it's a welfare issue. I feel like a lot of things we've done here, we've done because we've been told we should do or whatever. And, you know, I want to see the welfare issue. I want to see if there are ways that I can deal with it differently myself. That might put some animals at some risk, but we've got 3 or 4 ewes that have escaped the tail docking for some reason, and they're clean backsides, not had fly trouble. You know, okay, that's only a few in a group, but I'm tempted not to do anything with the lambs this year.
Interesting.
Traditionally, hill breeds aren't tail docked. I mean, you know, the Herdwicks and the Swales, and of course there's the short tail. I mean, you know, like the Hebrideans and Shetlands and Icelandics are all sort of mid-length tails. They're considered the northern short tails if you want to breed for them.
I think the concern here was just because we get a lot of flies. I don't know how much fly trouble they have there. Presumably they have similar fly trouble. I mean, but that's all the local farmers have sort of told me, you know. But I don't know. Give it a go.
Ali, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, we tail dock, and we do it because obviously we're a pedigree flock, and they actually want a tail docked animal, which is annoying. We've slowly been leaving longer tails on ewes or lambs from ewes that we want to keep, so it's quite an easy identifier. Like Wotech, we didn't band any of our boys this year and the year before. We probably are going back to banding purely because it means that we can run a single mob over winter. That was a huge problem this year because we're very small fields and we're on 35 acres, so it's tiny land for us. So we can't afford to put things, you know, into 3-4 groups at tupping. It just, I lose fields, so I can't do that. So we're going back to it.
Yeah, interesting. Another one, yes, Ian.
Yeah, one thought. I did a couple of years where I didn't ban the tup lambs as well. Growth rates are absolutely were fine. They did towards the end of their life. The ones that didn't, or towards the end of the year. Sorry, not the end of their life. Ended up that way. The ones that hadn't quite got the finish that they wanted started to put on frame rather than and not quite. You know, they got those secondary characteristics and started changing. They weren't finishing like a ewe lamb or a wether might do. Although the ones that did finish, there were plenty of them that finished and went into box lambs that I did, and they were fantastic. There was certainly no issue with flavour. It didn't have any negative effects from a flavour. You know, there was nothing like ram taint or anything like that.
What age were you going? What age were you culling at, Ian?
Sorry?
What age were you culling at for your box scheme?
Normally there'd be what, 8-9 months. It's sort of October, November time for April-born lambs. That's kind of generally where it seems to have gone later and later every year. The first few years down in Devon, I was getting lambs away in June, but that was on reseeds with fertilizer. As my system changed and I moved towards, I think this sort of goes back to what Fidelity was asking earlier. Can you get them finished and get them away on a tall grass system? And I certainly could, and I really could this year on herbal lays. They were fantastic and the flavors off the charts. I don't know that I got as many away as I'd like. Fat, I think it has been a bit of a struggle, but then I've also had I have a worm problem here, hence I've sold the sheep. So until I've cleaned out the worms for a couple of years, then I'll come back into it. But I might come back in with shedders to remove the tail docking and etc.
James, you've got your hand up.
So I've got a separate question. So if people want to keep going on this topic, I can come back to it shortly. If you like.
I think we've dealt with this topic. Let's have your questions.
Just had just a quick question on triplets and how people make decisions on whether to leave triplets on a ewe or whether to take one off, or how you sort of come to that decision. Do you routinely take one off, or do you tend to try and keep them all on, or what do people do with that?
I can tell you straight away, James, we always take one off. in our experience, and if you don't take one off, the ewe just ends up with a duff udder in later times as well. So, and we have plenty of singles, so we've had them all scanned so that you know, there's normally a single that comes along that can perfectly well raise one of those triplets, and so for us it's a no-brainer. We can't really see why you wouldn't do that.
No, we were in a slightly difficult situation. I say difficult, it can be good in some ways, in that our ewes are perhaps in too good a condition, and we scanned at sort of 225%.
Oh
so
God.
We've got a lot of singles, a lot of triplets, not very many singles this time.
Yeah. Ian, what would you say in response to that? You got your hand up.
Yeah, I've same as you've done. I've always taken one off. The only time I didn't, she was one of my best ewes, and she had a great bag, and she was really milky, and I thought, yes, she can do it. Blew up her udder. So mainly because the lambs hammered her teeth too much. So from that moment on, I always took one off, and I would take it off before it even suckled. I'd take it straight away. I'd either milk the ewe and feed it myself, or I would use supplies I already had from previous ewes. But I would take it off, put it in a pen before it's bonded with her at all, because then I could wet a doctor on much easier. Whereas I found if I let it overnight to get that first 12 hours or 24 hours of colostrum, the bond was impossible later. So I would, if I saw a triplet lambing, I would have a quick look, drive around the single field, see if anything else is lambing over there. If not, it would be, I'd scoop it up, and then it's in the pet lambs until something dies or something else, another single lambs, and then I'll be whizzing around with a wet doctor having a go at that.
David, you've put your hand up.
Does anybody sort of artificially rear lambs, or is that allowed with PFLA?
A good point about whether that's allowed, David, with the PFLA. I'm sure there'll be standards around the milk, which is, so the answer, I'm sorry, I don't know the standards well enough to answer it. Again, I'd say I wouldn't, because it's just, you're on hiding to nothing with pet lambs, time-wise and cost-wise, because the milk is so expensive. Does anyone else have any views on that?
I did work at a farm that did do that, and they had a lot of triplets one year. They took up, and we had 100. So I was working there as for 3 months, just through lambing and a bit afterwards. And we had 120 triplets. So we took them off, and they set them up with a calf feeder with a sort of auto, tip the bag in the top, proper auto system like that, and it got lambs away. But I wouldn't have fancied the bill. They'd have been, it probably washed its face, and that's about it. But
was it acidified milk, Ian?
No, it's just powdered. So acidified milk.
Yeah, well, there's a certain type of milk powder you can get. It doesn't. You see, pet lambs generally. Well, if there's a farm in Canada, there's a number of farms in Canada I've seen that were lambing 4 times a year. It was more or less a pig unit, and they were scanning well over 200%. And any yow that was failing, they just weak the lambs off or a lamb off, and they put them on this machine. There was 150 lambs in one of these machines, so they were doing it very commercially. There's one of the places it's the most efficient high welfare sheep unit I've ever seen. It was unbelievable how I
still wouldn't fancy it. I mean, I took lambs off, and I was desperate to get them adopted on. I mean, last year I ended up with no pet lambs, which was great. Previously, I've always ended up with a few towards the end where you just run out of singles, or there's one that just is in the system too long before you can. I don't know. There's always a couple left over, and
it is a pain in the ass rearing pet lambs. But I think if you have enough of them and have enough sheep, well, say you're rearing 100 of them or that kind of number, well, it's probably worth the while in the labour bill, because you're getting the economies of scale.
Probably in the last few years it has been.
Hannah, it looks like you might have got a view on this.
It's just an interesting one from the organic perspective. It's really difficult to source organic powdered milk for like milk replacer, and so if you're under organic standards, anything that has had a normal lamb lac or whatever you use
can't go through as organic. And so one way that I've got through this, and again, it works on a kind of a, you know, small to medium scale, is to have goats. I normally have goats kidding a month before I lamb. And then that gives the nannies a chance to get into full lactation, because this came up recently as well about sheep do really well. Lambs do really well on goat's milk, but not well on cow's milk. And so you can easily provide enough milk from a goat to be able to feed lambs. And the other real benefit to it is I normally have the goats in our kind of emergency intensive care lambing field shelter, and so you don't have to faff around with really, I mean, I don't really do much hygiene side of it, but you can just milk straight into the bottle and then just feed it straight to the lamb, and so it's still nice and warm. And if you've got a good nanny or a few good nannies, they'll kind of, you know, 24-hour warm milk available. It's really useful.
We've got literally 3 minutes left. It's been a great conversation, everybody. There's just one thing was, and I know that the person who asked this question is not here, but is there an issue about trying to do low input, particularly pasture for life, and you can't supplement feed when you're in the uplands and you know, areas of the country with shorter summers? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts or views on that.
Probably having the right breed was probably the most, selecting for the right type. Yeah,
definitely. And I've also got a question here about minerals, but maybe we've talked about that a bit. Whether people generally do or do not supplement their sheep with minerals at any times of the year.
Could I just ask, I think Kiwitech does something with free choice minerals. I've noticed that on the WhatsApp group. I'd quite like to know about that and where he sources the minerals from and which ones he gives. I know there's
I don't do it as individual minerals.
Okay.
So I have a sort of mixed mineral. So I haven't advanced to doing it as individual. I was tempted to do that, but never. I think there is a bit of an issue with getting the individual minerals. I know Ali does a little bit on some minerals, I think. And then apple cider vinegar is my thing that I tend to put out a bit. But again, I do it all based on, it's not very scientific, and a bit of biochar as well that I was experimenting with last year. It's not very scientific at the moment, but yeah. So I try not to. I mean, I'm not sort of producing for PFLA standards, as it were. I'm in Red Tractor, but but my ultimate aim is to try and get them to graze through the different environments that we've got here. So I'm opening up more woodland, creating more woodland type pasture grazing for them, hoping that they'll get more out of that and less on the mineral. They don't take a lot of mineral, to be fair. You know, we're not spending a lot on mineral at all, so they're hopefully getting what they need. But yeah, whether I will go down separate minerals, I don't know yet.
One last quick question from the chat. Does everybody Heptavac? Is it necessary?
Yeah.
I think it does depend on your land. I mean, we've had Papa Kid in here, so we do Heptavac because it prevents about that. I'm sure some people get away without it, and other people need to do it. I think
as with most vaccines, you don't need to do it until it's too late.
Yes.
Until it bites you in the arse 1 year.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my approach. So I've always vaccinated for most things.
Everybody, it is now 8:30 and it's been a great chat. I hope that you all feel that you've haven't got any questions that you just wish you'd asked. You've got 1 second to do it if you want to. No, so on that note, I'm going to just thank everybody for coming along, for your amazing contributions, and really nice to see you all and meet you all, and we can do this another time if we want to. So thanks everybody, and good luck with the lambing for all of you, as it's just about to start for some people. Catch up with you another time.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Charlotte for setting the call up. Bye.